On a multi-country tour of Africa this week, Secretary of State Antony Blinken has been making the case that the U.S. can be a, quote, equal partner with African nations.
There is an African proverb that says, until the lion learned to write his own story, all stories glorified the hunter, because he was the one writing. So this time round, we're going to write our own story.
Africa has shaped our past. It is shaping the present.
All of us collectively said that we now must decisively say that we are no longer going to be willing to export ore, rocks, sand, and dust. We want to export finished products from our continent. Now, when we initially said we want beneficiation of our minerals, many people thought we were mad or crazy. Now, we want to ensure that this becomes a reality.
White nations are panicking with the rise of Africa. Europe nations are panicking with the rise of Africa. Even Asian nations are panicking with the rise of Africa. It is reality. This is something powerful. It is very powerful to me, for example, because the same powers that colonized us, same powers that enslaved black people and exploited Africa for centuries, exploited our land, exploited our labor and our brilliance, they are starting to panic. How? They are not panicking because of some natural disaster or because of some financial crisis. No, they are panicking because Africa is rising, okay? The motherland is awakening. The youths of the motherland, the people in the diaspora are reconnecting with their roots. White nations are seeing their control slipping away, and that's why they panic. They see the shift in the global power. They see their monopoly on resources, on culture, and influence is crumbling, okay? Deep down, they know very well what they mean. They know very well that they are losing their grip to the world, okay? So that's what I'm going to talk about today. But before I go down into my commentary, because I have some things to say, let me play some videos here that resonate with what I'm saying. This is not a threat. It is not a threat. Let's watch these clips and then we come back and talk more.
The narrative of a rising Africa is being challenged. About 10 years ago, I spoke about an Africa of hope and opportunity, an Africa of entrepreneurs, an Africa very different from the Africa that you normally hear about of death, poverty, and disease. And that, what I spoke about, became part of what is known now as the narrative of the rising Africa. And I think it's time to take stock and to say, what were the things that the African countries did right? What did they do wrong? How do we build on all of this and learn lessons so that we can keep Africa rising? Investment in Africa is not for today, it's not for tomorrow, it's not a short-term thing, it's a longer-term thing. But if you're not invested in Africa, then you will be missing one of the most important emerging opportunities in the world.
Of course, we are in the Asian decade, but next decade will be the African decade. They have the youngest population, the highest fertility rate, and the systems, the infrastructure for success are being built as we speak. The success of Africa is coming, and it is inevitable.
In the year 1950, Africa's population was half that of Europe. Today, Africa's population is 2.5 times the size of Europe. By 2100, Africa's population will be 10 times the size of Europe. So you should focus your strategic sights on how you develop Africa. And here, even though Chinese investment in Africa is creating jobs for Africans and keeping Africans in Africa, the Europeans, instead of sending a thank you note to China for saying, thank you, China, for investing in Africa, you are joining the United States in criticizing Chinese investment in Africa when it is against your own interest.
There is an African proverb that says, until the lion learned to write his own story, All stories glorified the hunter because he was the one writing. So this time round, we're going to write our own story. For a long time, people wrote stories about Africa, and they said Africa is a place of disease, poverty, conflict, problems. We're telling them Africa is much more than that. Africa is a continent of huge renewable energy resources, 60% of the world's potential. Africa is a region of 40% of mineral resources globally, including those that are important and significant for energy transition. Africa has 60% of the world's arable and cultivated land that can be used for smart agriculture to feed the world. Africa has the youngest population globally at the mean age of 19 and growing. It's not only a workforce, but it's also a market. Africa has the largest natural assets for carbon sequestration. So we are repositioning Africa, not in the eyes of others who know very little about us, but in our own perspective, knowing exactly the wealth that we have. And we are saying that with these assets, we want to engage with the rest of the world in a win-win outcome. We want to work with others. We come with our assets. The rest of the world, we do not want to ask for favors. We do not want to ask for aid. We are not looking for donations for that matter. What we want is an engagement on how are we going to create investment opportunities. We have supported other regions. We've given them our raw materials, and we have been very faithful. We have also bought their finished products. It is time that we exchange. That this time round, they buy our finished product and they export to us their technology, and we agree on an investment program. So we are changing the narrative for Africa, and we are repositioning Africa as an investment destination, not as a destination for aid.
And when we were at the Russia-Africa Summit in St. Petersburg just now, all of us collectively said that we now must decisively say that we are no longer going to be willing to export ore, rocks, sand, and dust. We want to export finished products from our continent. Now, when we initially said we want beneficiation of our minerals, many people thought we were mad or crazy. Now, we want to ensure that this becomes a reality, because when you export raw materials, the value that you get is a fraction of what you get when you export real finished products. When you export iron ore, all you are really doing is to export rock and dust and soil. But what we want to do, we want to export stainless steel products made out of our iron ore. That is what we want to be focusing our attention on. Now, this is becoming a new slogan on our continent, and we want to drive it and drive it. And we also want to be able to say we should set up a minerals commission on the African continent. The AU has already taken a decision that there should be a structure that looks at our minerals endowment, and we should be able to come up with clear policies on how, as the African continent, we are going to deal with this wealth that we've been given as an endowment as the continent. One of the things that's happening now is that many countries outside of our continent are counting their wealth. They count their assets based on the mineral wealth that they have captured on our continent. as they used to do in the past, and I've been reading a wonderful history book. In the past, the slave trading and owning countries used to count their own assets as the slaves from our continent. They used to say, I have so many slaves and these are my assets. Now, we want to be rid of that. We don't want others to count as their assets the mineral wealth in our countries on the African continent. That mineral wealth belongs to Africans. It belongs to the people of this continent, and we must be the ones who
On a multi-country tour of Africa this week, Secretary of State Antony Blinken has been making the case that the U.S. can be a, quote, equal partner with African nations. In that vein, he recently announced a new partnership with Democratic Republic of Congo in an effort to protect some of that nation's natural treasures. It's one of the most famous and extraordinary places on Earth. The Virunga National Forest, established in 1925, is now a UNESCO World Heritage Site. This area, nested in the Congo Basin, is Africa's oldest national park. It's home to the only mountain gorillas left on the planet. But parts of this precious land are now up for auction. Visit to the capital, Kinshasa, Secretary of State Antony Blinken urged Congolese officials to prioritize environmental conservation.
We had concerns about the announcement of the auction of these oil and gas exploration blocks. Some of the blocks infringe on sensitive rainforest and peatland areas, including in the Virunga National Park.
U.S. and Congolese officials have agreed to oversee the oil and gas extraction to ensure the operations are done as sensitively as possible. But Congo's auction plans have enraged environmental activists.
Senegal's new president, Bassirou Diomaye Faye, is shaking Africa's political stage with bold reforms and fearless statements. At just 44, he became the youngest leader in Senegal's history, promising to fight corruption, reduce foreign control, and put Senegalese citizens first. Faye has already called for stronger African unity and policies that prioritize local industries over imports. Supporters see him as the face of a new generation of African leadership, while critics warn his radical changes could spark tension with the West. Either way, Faye is quickly becoming a symbol of Africa's rising power. And his momentum is only growing. Since taking office, Faye has pushed forward with policies to strengthen Senegal's economy, from investing in agriculture to expanding energy independence. His fiery speeches about dignity and sovereignty are echoing across the continent, inspiring millions who are tired of dependency and exploitation. Many say this is not just about Senegal, but about a wider African awakening, a call to build a future shaped by Africans themselves. Across West Africa, people are already calling Faye's leadership the spark of a new era.
Welcome back. Now, for a number of years, the Europe, not even years, it is centuries. Europe and America, all these white countries, they build their empires on Africa. Okay? Through colonialism, they did a lot, because colonialism, it was not just about ruling territories. It was about extracting wealth. Okay? They stole gold from Ghana. They stole diamonds from South Africa, oil from Nigeria, cobalt from Congo, and even people from across the continent through the transatlantic slave trade. Imagine, they stole even people, not only resources, okay? They made families to separate. Now, the foundation of their empire, or the foundation of their so-called civilization, the skyscrapers in London, Paris, the castles in France, the Industrial Revolution in Europe, the rise of Wall Street in America, all of this was built on the backs of black labor. All of this was built on the back of African Americans, or on the backs of African resources, using African resources, Now, the part that they never expected is that one day Africa will wake up. One day the sleeping giant will rise. And you know what? That day is today. Ain't tomorrow. The day is today. Family, let me break down some things to you, because for those youths who are watching me from across Africa, everywhere, let me break something for you here. The reasons why white nations are panicking, or Europe is panicking, or America is panicking, is because of this. Number one, economic shifts. Right now, Africa is no longer answering to anyone. Okay, a lot of African countries are running away from answering to people. Africa is no longer just a supplier of raw materials. Now, Right now, countries are building industries, technology hubs, and trade partnership. And this trade partnership bypass Europe and America. Okay, the old days of cheap extractions are ending. The old days of cheap labor are ending. The old day of cheap oil and gold and diamond, they are ending. Number 2 is about population. It matters a lot. You know, one day you had someone called Bill Gates saying that they need to reduce people in Africa. Okay, this is all it was all about, because Africa has the youngest population in the world right now, and by 2050, one in every four people on Earth, not in Africa, not in Europe, not in America, but 1 in 4 people on Earth will be African by 2050. What does that mean? That means something simple. Global culture, global markets, and innovation will be dominated by Africans. Now, white nations are shrinking demographically. White Africa is growing. That's their fear number 2. The fear number 3 is that geopolitical power. Now, when you look at the rise of alliance like BRICS, where African nations like South Africa are sitting at the same table with China, with Russia, and Brazil, it creates something to the West, okay? The West can no longer debate or dictate anything or everything. So we have this something we call geopolitical power. Geopolitical power is shifting too. Number 4, why they are panicking is about cultural influence. Okay, black culture, from music to fashion to language, all the way dominates the globe, dominates the earth. Right now, we are seeing young people from New York, young people from Tokyo. I saw a video of young women from Tokyo dancing African moves while wearing some, dressing in African way, trying to shake your bam bam. Shake. All this is African, man. They are trying to copy the African things. And white people cannot control culture anymore because it flows from within Africans. It flows from within black people. So you cannot control that. On my list, 5 but not least, something that makes white people panic or the fear within them is about the diaspora unit. The unit of black people is a threat to everyone. For a number of years, they divided us. They told Africans about black Americans only negative things. They told black Americans about Africa only negative things. They told Caribbean about African and American only negative things, okay? But right now, African, Caribbeans, Europe, African Americans, Afro-Latinos, right now, we are reconnecting, okay? Black America are moving to Ghana, to Kenya, to South Africa. They are buying lands. They're, I've seen Jamaicans, I've seen Caribbeans here in Kenya. They are doing businesses. Someone like Jamrock is here in Kenya doing businesses, connecting people. So the lie is gone. We are reconnecting. We are reconnecting. Now, someone will ask you, how do you know they are panicking? Because at the end of the day, maybe we are just bluffing. How do you know white nations? How do you know white people are in trouble, are in fear? I'll tell you this. You don't even know, or you don't even need to take my word for it. Just look around yourself. European leaders are suddenly talking about partnerships, okay? They are suddenly talking about partnership with Africa. But those partnerships are just desperate attempts to maintain influence. America is scared of China growing role in Africa or influence in Africa, okay? Because China being in Africa, it is threatening the dominance of USA. Another thing is about Western media, okay? Western media is constantly pushing stories of chaos in Africa, trying to scare black people from investing, from moving back, from uniting. That's the use of media. And that's why I say they are panicking, because if you don't panic, you don't need to use threats to make black people not to come to Africa. You feel me up to now? If you feel me up to now, let's go to the next. Africa has something I call new power move. Something is happening right now in Africa. When you look at technology, Nairobi, Lagos, Cape Town, these cities are now global tech hubs. And young Africans are building apps. Africans are fintech systems. Africans are bringing solutions that even Silicon Valley respects. Number 2, it is resources control. Right now, countries are renegotiating mining deals. Countries are taking back control of oil and minerals. Western corporations can't exploit like they did before because now the control is back to our hands. Most of the countries are doing that. So you see what's happening here? Okay. We have something we call Pan-African Cooperation. African Continental Free Trade Area, which is called TCFTA. It is creating the largest trade bloc in the world. And that is Africa trading with Africa, not depending on Europe. Okay? Now, you have seen how military bases have been sent away. I'll say this. Those in West Africa are pushing out French influence. Whether you agree or you disagree with their method, but one thing here is clear. Africans are rejecting foreign control. What is happening right now means something bigger for black people worldwide. It is bigger than just Africa. This is about all of us. It's about black Americans, about Caribbeans, it's about Africans, it's about Afro-Latinos, okay? All of us are involved in this because for too long, white supremacy told us that Africa was weak. They told us Africa was poor. They told you Africa is backward. They wanted you to believe this one thing, that Africa had nothing. But now the truth is out. Africa is so much powerful, wealthy, and rising. So that rising is what is affecting them. When Africa rises, all black people rise. It means no more begging for validation from the West. It means having a home based on power and dignity. It means controlling our own narrative, our own future, our own destiny. You see what I'm saying? Now, the panic is so much. Something I call the fear of losing control. Let me be real here. White nations are not panicking because they suddenly care about African future. No. They are panicking because they see the control slipping away. For centuries, their power rested on 3 pillars. And these pillars was military dominance, economic dominance, and psychological dominance. Psychological dominance is where they told us that we are inferior. And many black people believed it. Economic dominance is the control of trade routes, resources, and currencies. When you talk about military, they had the weapons, the armies, the navies. But now, the military advantage is being challenged. Nations like Russia and China are offering alternatives, okay? And African nations are buying advanced defense system, not just relying on Western aid. The economy dominance is breaking. Africa is building its own markets, trading with Asia, trading with itself. So it is changing. When you talk about psychological dominance, that one is collapsing because right now, African youths are not buying into this inferiority lies complex. They are not doing that. We are something else. Personally, I'm the example. I want to buy the inferiority. I'm not less. I love myself. I know who I am. I know where I belong. Okay? So, the reasons that I've listed, it's why white nations are panicking. It's why white nations are in panic mode. Okay? Because the system they build in our back is crumbling. Number 7. Let me talk about, is it number 7? I talked about 6 things. Okay, let me talk about demographics. Okay, this is the biggest threat of white supremacy. The truth is, Europe population is aging. And in some countries, the average age is above 45 years. The birth rates now are collapsing too. In America, white people are projected to become a minority in their own country within the next few decades. And meanwhile, Africa is booming. Over 60% of Africans are under 25 years. That means what? That means innovation. That means energy, creativity, and strength. Okay? Do you see what I'm saying here? The future of this world is African, and that terrifies white nations because they know they cannot stop demographics. They can build walls. Okay, they can try to block immigration, they can spread propagandas, but they cannot stop Africa population growth and power. Another thing why they're panicking is because how the media is reacting. It's very important. We need to talk about that because whenever Africa rises, Western media increases its attacks. When African nations demand fair trade, media calls it instability. When Africa rejects leaders, Western exploitation, media calls them dictators. When African youths protest against corruption or corrupted leaders supported by the West, they call it chaos. But when white nations do the same thing, suddenly it is called democracy or defending their country or defending sovereignty. Now, do you see that one? The double standard is intentional. So, Media, for example, is one of the weapons used to keep Africa down. They want the diaspora to fear Africa. They want Black Americans to believe Africa is just hopeless and poor. But I'll tell you this, the truth is out. Social media has broken the monopoly. Right now we are accessing informations. Africans are telling their own stories. Diaspora are traveling and visiting, vlogging, so a lot of things is happening and it is very scary. You see, all these alliances that are forming here in Africa, white nations are fearing it. I know the Sahel Alliance, the alliance from China, because when I talk about China, you love it, you hate it, but China has invested heavily in Africa. China has invested heavily in Africa, and white nations are scared because China doesn't come with colonial guilty. They come with complete business. They can't compete with China's infrastructure projects. Okay, Russia too, with the military cooperation and resources deals, Russia is stepping in Africa too. BRICS expansion with Egypt, Ethiopia, and South Africa in BRICS. Africa has a bigger voice in global economics. So, white nations knows that if Africa chooses new partners, then they lose. They lose leverages. For a number of years, they were the only option, but now Africa has choices. The panic is real. Let me tell you something. Something they don't want you to know is that white nations need Africa. From the video I played, you could hear they saying they need Africa. The smartphones they use, Africa. Electric cars they promote depends on lithium. Zimbabwe, they are in Africa. The industries need African oil, gas, minerals. Even their agriculture depend on fertilizer and products from Africa. So, when Africa talks about controlling resources, when Africa talk about processing minerals locally, when Africa talks about demanding the fair prices in West stalls, they are panicking. Okay? Now, one of the deadliest things that have made white people to panic or white nation to panic is the return of the diaspora. Our cousins, our brothers, our sisters, Black Americans, Caribbeans, and Afro-Latinos are visiting, are investing, are moving to Africa. And this scares white nation to its core. It scares them. Okay? Just imagine if millions of skilled Black doctors, engineers, artists, and entrepreneurs return to Africa. Imagine if billions of dollars from the diaspora, just a fraction of it invested in Africa. So it's great. It is doing great. So I'll say this. White panic is real. The fear is real. And the reason is because Black people are uniting. The reason is because Africa is rising. So Africa, when Africa rises, they know what to do their things. Fair trade deals, all of those. So you get what I'm trying to say here. I hope we are okay with that. So it's our moment here to shine as Africans. We need to study hard the history and everything so that we fall in place. Tell me what you think on the section about that video. Until next episode, peace out.